Hello, this is Monday. In a way I feel like apologizing for my birds, but no way. There's been a population explosion here. Some of the nests, a lot of the nests have fledglings in them. I'll eventually show you that. So I know they're loud, I can talk loud. We only have 5 days left and this course is over. Alright, now I've been dreading this day in a way. This is hard. This is going to be hard for me to talk about. This is where I'm going to stop, 1990. I'm not going to try to, I believe this is the 11th period. The Victorian period was the last one that I was dealing with, which I said for my purposes went up to World War I. I think that was the 10th period, but I'm not sure as I've separated them. I'm tempted to review it for you, but I don't want to take the time. Alright, well today I'll deal with history. I used to separate the 20th century into 10 decades, but I'm not going to, and I think this is maybe better. So when I look at the history of the 20th century, and I'm talking now about from the beginning of World War I up to 1990, which I'll deal with in a second or third video here, wars. I hate to actually think like that, but when I look back, I mean, the last 100 years, there's been 100 years of wars. There have been so many. And I say wars, hot and cold. I'll explain about the Cold War, or try to, in a subsequent video. But now I'm going to talk about the hot ones. World War I. I'm not a history teacher. That's a relief for me to say that in a way, because that is not my expertise. I am not ready to explain how that happened, how World War I began. It had to do with alliances and rivalries, and my wife was saying Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria's descendants and alliances. I don't know, but it started. It started with a bang. It started with an assassination, and then off it went. And I really think that, I mean, the world had never seen a war like that. I think it was called the Great War for a while, or the War to End All Wars, or something like that. And I have to think, partly it was the world did not realize what they were in for. Now the age of progress, call it, the Industrial Revolution had made all these new weapons possible, and that video looks like it's crooked. I'm going to straighten that a little bit. Sorry. I got the birds excited. But in any case, on it went for about 4 years, and it was horrible. I think casualties measured something like 20 million, maybe. The United States entered late in the war, and by the end of it, Germany had been defeated, which has a lot to do with what then came. I'm not a history teacher, but anyway, it was huge. And I also dare say that it was, as a result of World War I, that there was a shift in world power. The United States had not been devastated by that war. Europe had been devastated. And with that, the United States begins this process of getting to be such a powerful nation on the world stage. Well, then you get into the 20s, and they're nicknamed the Roaring 20s. There was this great boom time in the United States, and in a way it was because all this stuff that was being made for war, all these factories geared up to do that, they started to make consumer goods. And I'll have more to say about that later this week. But anyway, boom times, big times, at least in the United States. Now, meantime, Germany was suffering. But a lot of this is the United States perspective on this. It was boom times. But all of a sudden it went bust. The stock market crashed in 1929 on a certain day. I think it was Tuesday, Black Tuesday, October. It crashed. And the boom times were over. Now the crash was quick. But then in comes this period of the 1930s called the Great Depression. And the United States, well, the world I would say, but the United States anyway, has not seen anything like it since, although it was a close call. Within the last 5 or 6 years, it's the closest the U.S. came and the world, I want to say, with it, although I understand the U.S. perspective somewhat better, it came close. But there was unemployment like had never been seen before. And one of the things I think that helps, Adolf Hitler, I have tried, and I continue to try, to understand what he was thinking. And seriously tried. I mean, I've tried hard. And I continue to work on that. And how it was that he rose to power in Germany. But I think an awful lot of it it has to do with the Great Depression. The world was suffering, but Germany was suffering more, I believe, than the rest. Because one of the mistakes that had been made back here was the victorious nation. You know, I'll maybe say it again later on. Victors get to write the history. The victors get to write the history, and so, you know, it makes it harder to get a broader understanding of it. But I think it's now quite accepted that it was a mistake to try to make Germany pay for all the damages, war reparations, I think they were called, as if it were all Germany's fault, and now they had to make these payments. Well, the German economy was in horrible shape, and that, in a sense, you know, you're getting my version of this, which may not be right, but it's the best that I've been able to come up with. Given that environment, you've got a country that is so put down. I think of it really almost in Freudian terms. I mean, if Germany ever had a weak ego, I think it would have been at that point. It had lost a war, its economy was in tatters, and then along comes a man with a vision. Now, I'm attempting to explain Adolf Hitler, and I know many of my viewers are Germans, and I don't know what comment, if you will. I mean, I want to know. He had a vision, and he was an unbelievable orator. You know, only recently I've begun to think that maybe the way to think of him, well, and along he comes, saying to the German nation that they're a great nation, the greatest. I mean, you now I bring Nietzsche involved, and you know, I taught about him in the Victorian era, Nietzsche with his philosophy, the Übermensch, the Superman, the Aryan race. And I mean, to somebody with a weak ego on a personal level, if you've got a weak ego, flattery is so sweet. I mean, it's what you need so badly. And another thing that you need with a weak ego is somebody to blame, to convince yourself that you're maybe not so bad. And, you know, I'd used it as a way of explaining bullying sometimes. Why would somebody bully? Well, as I try to explain this, there were the Jews. They were so easy to blame, and not really that much of a danger. The danger is the ground I'm in right now as I try to talk about this. But honestly, for lifelong, I have tried to understand this, and I haven't hit it, that I have a great fondness. I love the German language. And I would like to know. So anyway, one way or another, I know, the one other thing I was going to say was I've recently begun to think of him in terms of a poet. He didn't write poetry. Adolf Hitler was an artist, though. And you know, nowadays, when I think about the dilemmas that we have before us now with the environment, at different times I've said to myself, it's going to take a poet or poets or songwriters to lead us out of this. I don't look for politicians to be able to come up with the answer. It's going to take somebody with a new vision. And anyway, so I began to think of him sort of more in those terms. But in any case, he was not alone. He swept a lot of the German nation with him. They believed him. They were going to die for him. I'm taking too long with this, and it's an uncomfortable subject for me. But I'll show you why I feel that this has to be dealt with. Anyway, he rose to power in Europe. And then that was in the 30s. The United States tried to ignore it. World War II broke out. I don't know exactly when to say it started. It started in Europe in the late 30s. the United States was in it for about 4 years. I don't know, let's say approximately 1938. It would really, the invasion of Poland would be usually called the start of it. And it goes up to about 1945. I may be off by a year, but remember, I'm not a history teacher. Now, from the American perspective, what Americans are most quickly to know about is Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Italians, they were called the Axis nations. The Italians were not such a powerful force to be reckoned with in the long run. But Germany and Japan were allies, and when Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, I mean, it was December 7th, 1941, I think, although I might say 42, suddenly the U.S. was involved in the war. D-Day is another thing that jumps out. That was, I believe, June 6th. I think it was 1944, I think it was. I think it was 1944. Where the Allied nations went across the English Channel and made a landing on France on the beaches of Normandy. That stands out. And the other thing that stands out to Americans, I think, is that the two bombs, atomic bombs, dropped on Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All right. I want to stop here and shift subject. Not exactly shift. I want to focus a little bit more on this. So I'm going to pause at the moment for a second video.